Host for ESPN Radio, Barton Hahn Show. I think he just wrapped up his show a few minutes ago, and MSG Network as well covers the Knicks there. Alan Hahn joining us here on the Bill Riley Show. Alan, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. So is there a little buzz? Is there a little pressure on Leon Rose and the Knicks to get this thing done?
So I don't know if pressure is the right word. I just heard how you set that up, and I think you set it up perfectly. It's more like if Utah wants to just kind of go full into their reset mode, like you want to get this done before training camp, right? And so training camp's usually the last week of September. So we're already on a countdown to try to get something done at that point. On the Knicks side of things, it's more of a want at this point. It's not necessarily something that if they don't make a trade by training camp that everyone will believe it's dead. I think it's something that, all right, it doesn't get done by training camp. Maybe it gets done by the February trade deadline. If not, you take it into next year, all depending on how everything goes. The Knicks know what they're offering. I think we all kind of know what they're offering, right? They're offering a bevy of first-round picks. It's the reason why they bailed out of the first round this year by just collecting more first, because they kind of had a feeling this was coming and they needed to be ready. It's a matter of just getting to an agreement. And everybody you talk to around the league all kind of feels like this is inevitable. And I always tell a lot of people, from what I know, it's not an if, it's just a when. So we'll see. Is it before training camp, or is this something that will end up being a story that hovers over both teams going into the season? It is kind of funny how not only is the only nationally televised game by the Jazz when they play the Knicks in November, keep in mind the Knicks go to, I believe, Salt Lake City right before the trade deadline. So it's an interesting way the NBA likes to put the schedule together.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, at least from the Jazz standpoint, I mean, Donovan will be a good soldier. He knows this is going to be done. He's not going to re-sign with him in 3 years. I just feel like Ainge has committed to this rebuild and hitting the reset button. And I just think keeping Donovan around on two fronts, everybody's going to be asked about it every single day. And then also, he's going to help you win games because he's good. If he's out there on the floor, he helps you win games. And right now, I don't think the Jazz necessarily want to win games. I think they'd like to be in that top 3 or 4, not in the top 15 when it comes to the lottery. So I think it behooves them to move on. I don't know if Danny – I've said all along, Alan, I don't think he's going to get the same bevy of first-round picks that he got from the T-Wolves, but I think his assets will be better on the other side. So he'll get first-round picks, but I think the assets he get will be better than the ones that he got. And they're young, and they're under contract assets. So I think there'll be a little bit of give on the Jazz part, but I just feel like they want to get this thing done before camp begins.
It's interesting you say it because I actually look at it a different way. So it's really interesting how we have these contrasting perspectives. And again, it's all, I guess, where each side that we're from. I looked at the Rudy Gobert trade, and I looked at that as, okay, well, there's now the framework of what this deal should look like. But, you, I think, will get more picks out of it than you will players. Like what you got back in Rudy Gobert is 4 firsts, 3 unprotected. But the players are, Patrick Beverly. I mean, you've got guys who aren't prospects, right? I think the Knicks look at it that way, too. All right, we can give you more picks than the Timberwolves gave you because they can, and I believe they're willing to. Like, I do think they could send 5 or even 6 firsts back in a deal like this, which is a ton of picks, obviously, and that's a great way to rebuild your franchise. But I think where they're having this is where I think the conflict begins. It's, okay, Quentin Grimes, who's a really nice second-year player, had a really good summer league, and is a 2, so he fit the hole that is now going to be opened up in the starting lineup. And he's a young player, under control, obviously, with his contract, all the stuff you mentioned. Okay, you got to give to get, so there's one. Evan Fournier makes sense with the money match and everything else. And, I mean, if you're going to have a bad team, you might want to get a French center to replace the French center that went out. That kid who's going to be in the draft is special. And, well, Evan Fournier is a French guy, so you might want to have that in. So that all makes sense. But if you're telling me, well, the Jazz also want Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickly, all right, that's where I think the Knicks are saying, no, you don't. You don't want those guys. You just want them so the deal looks better. But we need those guys for us to be competitive and to have a deep team. So I don't think the Knicks are willing to just, all right, we'll give you a bunch of young guys, knowing that the Jazz don't really want them. it's more or less just to make the deal look better. 5 or 6 first-round picks, Phil, that's a lot to give up for one player. And that's where I think I'm really curious to see when you get to a point of a deal, which side said, all right, I'll do it, right? Like which side finally said, I'll take it. Because I think the Knicks are the team that's hesitating right now from completing this deal because they don't want to give up multiple young players.
So you think that it's more the players and the assets than it is the draft picks with the Knicks? Okay.
Yeah. I firmly believe that the Knicks are not at all hesitant about giving up, at the very least, 5 first-round picks. Now, will there be some protections on these picks? I believe there will be some, not all. I think some will also be, just like Minnesota did. I think some will have no protection. But I do think some will have to come with them, mainly because some of them that they have already have protections on them, so they don't even have that choice. But I don't think it has to do with picks. I really don't. I think this is more about don't completely take away our depth. The Knicks' second unit has a lot of guys under 23 and under, and they like that. I don't think they want to give up too much of that type in this deal. But the picks, I don't think they're worried about the picks.
Alan Hahn with us from MSG and ESPN Radio here on the Bill Riley Show today. We're talking about the Jazz and the Knicks. Are there a couple of, you mentioned a couple of the guys. Is there anybody that's untouchable in your mind of the younger assets? Because I understood they like Grimes an awful lot. The Jazz probably value him too. But is it more about the number of those assets, or are there a couple of players that are untouchable?
I would put R.J. Barrett in the untouchable category. And I would also wonder if Utah would even want him, not because he's not. He's really good. He averaged 20 points a game last year. And he was, on the verge towards the end of the season, really coming into his own for a guy who's just, I don't even think he's turned 21 yet. But you have to pay him.
Right.
He's due now for his extension off of his rookie deal. And if you don't pay him, he becomes, a restricted free agent next summer. And if you're Utah, you don't want that. So do you want to pay him? And he's the number 3 overall pick in the draft. So it's going to cost a lot. He might not get the full max, the Zion Williamson 180 or anything like that, but he's still going to get a pretty sizable extension for where he is and what his numbers dictate. So do you want to deal with that? I don't know. But that's, if you talk about the gem of the Knicks young players, R.J. Barrett is that gem. He's a special young player. He's a really good, as far as just character, toughness, all the things you want. So I believe if the Knicks would say, you're not taking him. But I always, I wonder if they'd even want to take him for the purposes I just laid out, the fact that you have to pay him by October, or he could go into restricted free agency and cost you a lot of money if you have to match a deal.
If you're Danny Ainge, let's just say Grimes and Fournier, because Fournier's money is what helps this deal. If you're looking to get one other asset, do you want, and you're rebuilding, do you want Obi Toppin or do you want Emmanuel Quickly? I'll be honest, I haven't watched a lot of Knicks basketball and haven't seen those guys play a lot. I saw them play in college, so I know their game there. If you're the Jazz looking to rebuild, which one of those guys provides a good foundation piece for you, better foundation piece for you?
It's a great question to ask, because also it depends on what you're looking for, right? So that's where it gets really curious, because if you're looking for a guard, now the 2 players that we're talking about, Obi Toppin, as you probably know, was National Player of the Year in college.
Yeah, Dayton, right?
And so, but he's an older player too. Remember, he was drafted after playing 4 years of college basketball, so he's older, 24 years old, and he's a 4. I don't know yet if he's a starter in the NBA. And that's not being disrespectful of the kid. The problem is I don't know, because I didn't see it. Because he had Julius Randle in front of him, and it's hard, to get those kind of minutes to prove that you have a starting quality game. But what I've seen of him seems like he's a guy that would thrive in up-tempo, needs a guard to set him up, and that sounds like a good off-the-bench kind of player. Emmanuel Quickly, some people thought he was getting to a point of showing you he could be a starting point guard in the NBA, and other people believe he's a really good scoring guard, and he's the type of guy you want to bring off the bench. So you're talking about 2 guys that I don't know are starters. Quentin Grimes is a starter. Now, another name that no one brings up that I find interesting that I haven't heard. heard in this is Cam Reddish. Now, you remember Cam Reddish from Duke. Cam Reddish was a lottery pick. Cam Reddish has, when he gets minutes, puts up numbers. Like, he can score. He's a wing, and he's got starting quality performances with the Hawks and in a very limited capacity with the Knicks that have made you say, well, he's very young, he's 20, and with some development, he could turn into a really good wing in the NBA. And it'll be his third team now, obviously, in his first 4 years in the NBA. But that's a name that if I was Utah, that's a name I'd say, look, like, that's a guy that you could get, and people could think he's an afterthought. And within 2 years, you could have yourself a guy who's a starting wing player that, when he came into the NBA, people thought had all-star potential. I haven't heard his name, but that's somebody I would focus on, because I don't know if Quickly and Toppin, from a Jazz perspective, have the potential as starters. I just think they would be good role players, good off-the-bench kind of players, but I don't know if that's what you're looking for in a deal like this.
All right, two more things for you, Alan, then we'll cut you loose. Alan Hahn, kind enough to take a few minutes after his show today. Barton Hahn on ESPN Radio, MSG Network as well. You think this deal gets done? You're just not sure on the time frame, right? You wouldn't be surprised if it went at trade deadline?
It wouldn't shock me, no. But I think I'm still leaning towards this gets done before training camp, because both sides really would prefer to have that done before training camp. So I do think they both feel the parameters are there to get a deal done. I think it's a lot of which when you don't have a timeline or a time limit, you will continue to go around the league and wait and see if there's anybody else that might offer you something that could compete and maybe push the Knicks to have to add more into the pot. You always want that leverage, and I think Danny Ainge has proven that in his past, that he likes to play that game. But I do think as we get closer to September, the clock starts to tick on, okay, we need to have training camp. We want to have our team set